Paul's letter to the church in Galatia, we read, "Yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus, in order to be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law, because by works of the law no one will be justified. But if, in our endeavor to be justified in Christ, we too were found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? Certainly not. For if I rebuild what I tore down, I prove myself to be a transgressor. For through the law I died to the law, so that I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." There was a lot of debate over the relationship between faith and law. And this really started in the 1500s with Martin Luther and John Calvin. This discussion, this pattern of thought, was a novel idea. This was not something that the church for the last 1500 years had struggled with or debated over or discussed. It just wasn't a question. Luther and Calvin's approach was novel, it was new, it was off track, it was not a grand revelation of anything. It was an invented problem that they came up with. Since that time, over the last 500 years, there's been so much discussion and debate over the relationship between these two. But there really shouldn't be. It's really as simple as we, as the church, as the people of God, are no longer under the authority of the Mosaic law. The law in the Old Covenant no longer applies to us. Since the incarnation, Christ has fulfilled all those requirements, and the Old Covenant law has been made obsolete. It does not apply to us. When you were a child, you had parents that looked over you, that raised you up, that gave you instruction, gave you rules, gave you a life, a household to live in and to follow. And they formed you, hopefully, into a person that would succeed in life as an adult. So now, as an adult, hopefully, you don't have those same parents acting in the same way over you, controlling and directing what you do. You should be in a position where you think, you speak, and you act according to love for God, love for neighbor, and the pursuit of holiness. That's where we are. As Christians, we don't have written rules over us. We need to function by love for God and love for neighbor. Because we are adults, because we have the freedom to do whatever we want, hopefully what we want is that of those things that are good and right and true. Hopefully the framework that we have in place for our life is built on loving God and loving neighbor, pursuing holiness. As Paul says at the end of this passage, we live in the flesh, but we need to live according to the love of Jesus Christ. We are not spirits trapped in a body, as some would have you believe. There's this idea of a platonic approach to life where our spirits are trapped in physical bodies, and we need to free them. You see it in a lot of the New Age discussions and such, but that's not the case at all. When God created man, he made him body, he formed his body from the earth, and then he breathed life into him, and it was at that point that man became a living being. So to be truly human, you are body and spirit. And as mature adults, as hopefully wise adults, living in the new covenant, no longer under Mosaic law, we approach life with love for God and love for neighbor. And we are responsible over both aspects of our lives, the physical, our bodies, and the spiritual, our minds and our hearts. So with both of these things in place, we should be moving forward in holiness. We should be helping others move forward in holiness. And we don't have a written law hanging over us. that we need to worry about, that frames our life, that motivates us. We should be moved and motivated by our love for God, our love for our neighbor, our pursuit of holiness, and knowing that we need to be responsible for how we approach life.